Ready? Great. All right. We are back at the SDG studio, and I believe this is the final segment here on the stage, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so what an honor it is to stand here again on this stage. I've seen so many amazing presentations and passionate, opinions coming out of this corner of the festival, and I'm so relieved that this is the part that will go out and be persistently available online on UN.org, webtv.un.org, and so whenever you need to find inspiration, you can find all of these wonderful presentations that we've seen. So in a way to close this stage that can give us the most bang for the buck, I think, is there's no better way than to introduce our civil society partners who are really instrumental in every kind of activity that you can think of, but there's one specific thing that we want to talk about. We, as a little bit of background, the UN and the member states and those who are sitting in New York have always said, are we sure that people are getting it? Are we sure that there's a movement building? Do people understand the SDGs and so on? And of course, we say yes. There's amazing work out there, and you can you can show them anecdotes and different pieces of it. But we said there needs to be, going back to the kind of the learning that we've had in the past from civil society partners, a catalytic moment where all of that activity can be recognized. And so a day of action was the thought. And so we consulted with the experts who are our civil society partners about how exactly can we unfold something like that? What might it look like? And for the first time last year on September 25th, we opened this possibility. Member states had this very interesting need for it. And September 25th is not just a day we picked at random. That is what we call the SDG Birthday. That is the anniversary of the day that the member states of the UN in 2015 agreed that they all will achieve these goals, or they will do everything in their power to achieve them. And so that day needs to be remembered, and their commitment needs to be remembered. And so we're delighted to have with us today some of the originators of that, the first collaborators we contacted on this day of action. And it will not just be a day that we celebrate last year, but we will celebrate this day every year, including in 2018. So today we want to talk a little bit about what happened last year, but then focus on how everyone can get involved on September 25th, 2018. With me today we have Salina Sanou, Chebbi, and Oli Henman. Each have a different role in the constellation of civil society partners, but I'm going to give them the floor, and they can tell you the story themselves. So who should we start with? So can you give us, Salina, thank you so much, and perhaps you can just talk to us a little bit about how the Day of Action idea unfolded last year and what you think it was worth for.
Actually, I was beginning to ask myself the question, which anniversary is this? And I realized this is the third anniversary since the SDGs came into being, or since they were born. And I think time goes very fast. So if we don't really act so fast, then we will be caught, as we say, with our pants down, because we are not putting in the efforts, the efforts that we need to do. Last year, we, for example, in our own organizations, in our own platforms, we mobilized really widely, mobilizing, especially, from the grassroots, from the national level. But I'm calling this year for a bottom-up approach in mobilization for this particular anniversary, for this global Day of Action, because I feel that we continue speaking for people who are never here, they never participate in these things, and we are so good at speaking for them, representing them. Let them tell us their story. So I want it to be bottom up. I want it that this year we really mobilize from the grassroots and give the women, the youth, children the opportunity to speak in their own terms. I heard this today from Aya, and it really went right into my heart. She said, give the youth the opportunity to speak on their own terms. And I remember when we were doing the post-2015 agenda process, and we were collaborating with President Salif in Liberia, who then was was in the high-level panel. The youth were there, and they told us, wait a minute, don't talk about us, don't talk for us. we are in the room. And from now on, we are going to speak for ourselves. And that is really speaking in your own terms. So the way it unfolded last year, we managed to really mobilize very widely, especially in our own organizations. In Kenya, for example, being coordinated by GCAP, we mobilized widely. But this year, as I'm repeating again, I would like a bottom-up approach whereby this time we really go deep into the grassroots and get the people speaking.
Thank you, and you can tell the passion behind the voice there. That's a persistent characteristic that always energizes us with Salina and the whole network in front of us. Last year we had a great idea, but we didn't have enough time to really see it formulated in many ways. You guys were ready to go, and you had all kinds of ideas and went out there. But we all agreed that maybe this year we should start a little bit earlier in calling this action, and so that's why we've decided to take this moment to start this campaign of awareness about the day, and also to incentivize people to think about what they can do for it. Maybe we'll first go to Aya, and you can give us a little example of what you did for the Day of Action and how you think it can be an important part of the calendar for SDG advocacy.
So I lead a movement called Africa Youth Movement, and our members are spread across 40 countries. And they have participated in the Day of Action in all sorts of ways. But I think the focus of our movement is really to have them lead and understand the agenda the way they want it, but also from the global agenda to Africa's agenda. So the focus is really not just on the word we want, but on the Africa we want. And the way we want to address the SDGs, it should also be in a creative way in our own context. I think just being futuristic and looking for words, what we should do, yes, we should do it on our own terms, but also we should have a little more solidarity with especially African countries that are very restricted in their civic space, very restricted in the way we operate, and with very limited resources. And if we already have a lot of budget cut and we understand all these resources challenges at the UN level and at the international community level, I think if we want to do it, we can do it. If we want to mobilize and fundraise, we can. And the first who have to receive that fund are movements and are grassroots movements, because they are the frontliners, they are the actors, and especially movements, not NGOs or traditional partners, because movements emerge and re-emerge all the time, and they are there, they will never die, and they will continue to be. So if you invest there, you're smart, because then you are investing in a very sustainable action that will go on even when the Day of Action is over, even when 2030 agenda is over.
Thank you. And again, it's so inspiring, and we always have to remind ourselves when we sit in the UN buildings and meetings to be humble, to remember that we are but servants trying to make a space for people who need help to find the solutions that they need. We have no special answers. We have no special privileges. What we need to do is make sure that everybody in power and any position uses or diversifies their power and shares that in some way with the people who are out there really suffering and who are out trying to change the world. And I think organizations like yours, Aya, and the speeches that you've made here are so inspirational, because that helps us remember our humility and remember what this is all about. And thank you very much for that. So our job is to be that force that empowers those grassroots organizations, doesn't hinder them, doesn't try to script what they say, but just gives them that space. And it's a great privilege to be able to play some small role in that. So thank you. I want to introduce Oli Henman. He's a very delightful man, and he also has quite an important job ahead of him. He has recently been named as the man in charge or the overseer, or I'm not sure what the exact title is, but there's a great coalition called Action for Sustainable Development, and this is something that has been very impressive for us. Perhaps civil society is leading the charge again in really crossing all kinds of borders and boundaries and coming together and looking at this agenda as one big mobilization that everyone can take part in, and it's a very difficult process. Governments are not really yet doing that. Each ministry is trying to do their own thing. Private sector firms are trying to figure out what their role might be. But as usual, civil society has figured it out. And they're really working together. And they're co-creating something amazing. And Oli, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the organizational structure as well as what you have in mind for the Day of Action. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Mitch. It's a real privilege to be here and with such inspiring colleagues and activists sitting together. And I think that's really the point, as you say, that it's a joint initiative. We really believe in the importance of collaboration, partnership, participation. The process that we've been involved with as civil society partners over the last few years with GCAP, with Civicus, with the International Forum of Platforms, with CAN International, some of the climate organizations, some of the key big conveners of civil society has really been about collaboration and trying to identify where do we see our role as fellow travelers in this journey towards a real transformation. How do we ensure that 2030 really is that transformative process that we've talked about? And I think for that to happen, as both Aya and Salina have said, it really does have to be a collaboration, and it needs to be driven by the communities who are most affected themselves. This is not something that can be driven from capitals anywhere, and I don't see my role in any way as driving things, but rather as enabling and supporting and facilitating those who are already active. And I think that's the real power of this network. I mean, I can think back now to 2015 and when the goals were agreed, and at that time we felt that things were moving. Civil society had been quite widely involved in terms of drafting some of the actual text of the goals. But unfortunately, we've actually seen governments stepping back from that over the last few years. And I think it's quite concerning when we talk about universality that even some of those governments in the global north, the traditional, those who've been in favor of this agenda for many years, now seem to be stepping back. And I think the closing of civic space, unfortunately, is a global phenomenon. And we're going to have to work even harder to keep the pressure up, to keep that agenda on the table so that it's not something that drifts away over the next few years. Thank you.
Well put indeed. I think that we all have some thinking to do and about what we might do next. But what's really reassuring is that there is this kind of movement developing where we can find a way to bring all those individual actors into a singular voice and a singular powerful entity that can challenge any institution or any large organization, corporation, what have you. The power of communications and organization is now in the hands of everybody, and you're doing a great leadership role of showing how that can actually be transformed into action. You wanted to say something, Aya? Please go ahead.
I just wanted to add that the Global Day of Action has to be fun. You know, like our populations are frustrated. Our civil society is exhausted. Our activists are getting depressed. So the Global Day of Action has to have art, has to have satire, has to be fun. And it is a political agenda, and many people think politics is boring, but we got to make it fun. And if anything we want to celebrate in 2030, the fun process we have been through.
Great. Salina, do you have any final words? Because we're...
I just have a final word. Coming out of CSW, and talking about rural women and girls. The Commission for the Status for Women. This year, the theme was rural women and girls. And I really want to say, coming from that background, this is an opportunity to really mobilize women and girls from the grassroots and let them have the fun.
So I think everyone's going to be hearing from us and from our partners in civil society about this Day of Action. We're going to be launching this early so everyone has an idea of how they can participate, how they can get their organization involved. And I think you're right. There has to be we have to be optimistic, right? We have to show that there is something, there's a future for all of us, and nobody can take that away from us. It's up to us and every organization, every individual to demand it. And I think that the SDGs give everybody an amazing kind of tailwind to push them forward, but they have to point in the direction that is most important to them. So all we want to do is encourage that, and we're grateful for our partners in civil society for showing us the way and reminding us what needs to be done, and we continue to rely on your guidance and support for that in the UN, and we welcome it. So anything we can do to help and support this Day of Action is something that we will pursue. So let me just say thank you again to our panelists, Salina, Aya, Oli. Great work again, and congratulations on this wonderful organization and the energy that I think is going to come from around the world on this Day of Action. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, folks. Maybe we can get